Right now, most people hear the words Hormuz Blockade and think of destroyers, carrier groups, and oil tankers. And that makes sense because the Strait of Hormuz is first of all a naval problem. It is a narrow sea choke point, one of the most important in the world, and any attempt to control it starts with ships, surveillance, and maritime pressure. But that is only part of the story. Because in a blockade like this, the real challenge is not only the big ships you can see, it is also the smaller threats that can move fast, stay low, and create disruption out of proportion to their size, and that is where the A-10 Warthog comes in. So in this video, we are not asking whether the A-10 runs the blockade. It does not. We are asking something more useful. Why would the United States still rely on an aircraft built decades ago in one of the world's most important maritime flashpoints today? The answer says a lot about how this blockade actually works, what kind of threats the U.S. expects to face, and why the fight for Hormuz is about systems, not just platforms. To understand that, we need to start with the blockade itself. After U.S. Iran talks broke down, Washington moved to enforce a blockade on maritime traffic going to and from Iranian ports. Reuters reported that within the first 24 hours, 6 merchant ships turned back, and the operation was being enforced by a very large combined force of ships, aircraft, and personnel. The Associated Press also reported that the blockade was focused on Iranian ports rather than fully shutting every ship out of the Strait of Hormuz, which is an important distinction. In simple terms, this is a pressure campaign built around maritime control, inspections, and route dominance. That means the U.S. problem in Hormuz is not just how to stop a large navy in open water. The problem is how to keep a choke point functioning while facing smaller and more irregular threats. Reuters reported that U.S. officials have specifically warned about Iranian fast attack craft approaching the blockade. And that matters because fast boats are one of the classic tools Iran uses in this environment. They are smaller, cheaper, harder to track than major warships, and they are well suited to a narrow, crowded maritime corridor where commercial traffic, military traffic, and political signaling all mix together. This is why the A-10 matters. Not because it replaces destroyers, not because it controls the sea by itself, but because the A-10 is built for a kind of mission that becomes very important when the threat is low, fast, dispersed, and close to the surface. The official U.S. Air Force fact sheet says the A-10 offers strong maneuverability at low airspeeds and low altitude, can loiter near battle areas for extended periods, and can operate in demanding conditions while carrying both precision-guided and unguided weapons. Those features are not abstract. In Hormuz, they line up with a very real operational problem. How do you watch, identify, and if necessary, strike small surface threats before they disrupt a convoy, challenge a warship, or force shipping traffic to back off? And this is not only theory. During a March Pentagon briefing, General Dan Kane said the A-10 was in the fight and targeting fast attack watercraft in the Strait of Hormuz. Defense reporting repeated that point, and official defense coverage also highlighted the aircraft's role along the southern flank. So the A-10 is not being imagined into this story. It has been explicitly tied to maritime interdiction against exactly the type of small vessel threat that matters in Hormuz. Here is where it gets interesting. The A-10 is often talked about as a land war aircraft, a platform people associate with close air support over battlefields. But in a place like Hormuz, some of its best-known qualities translate surprisingly well to a maritime security role. It can stay over the area for a long time. It can fly low and relatively slow compared with faster jets. That gives pilots more time to sort out what they are seeing. In a crowded environment where not every boat is a threat, that matters. Speed is useful in war, but so is time on station, and the A-10's value often comes from staying in the fight long enough to build a clearer picture of what is happening below. That does not mean the A-10 works alone. In reality, its effectiveness depends on the wider system around it. Reuters says the blockade uses dozens of aircraft. That likely means surveillance, targeting, route management, and command and control are all feeding into the same picture. CENTCOM has previously highlighted joint aviation integration exercises in the region involving A-10s, Navy P-8 maritime patrol aircraft, destroyers, Coast Guard cutters, helicopters, and joint terminal attack controllers. So when people ask why the A-10 matters, the best answer is not that it is the star of the operation. The best answer is that it is a useful aircraft inside a larger network built to see more, react faster, and hold the line in a complex maritime zone. And the geography of Hormuz makes that role more important, not less. Reuters notes that the strait is only about 34 kilometers wide at its narrowest point. Around 1/5 of the world's oil supply moves through this route. That means any disruption here quickly becomes an economic story as well as a military one. If fast craft, mines, or even just the perception of danger slows traffic, the impact can be felt in insurance premiums, shipping schedules, and energy prices. In that kind of environment, a platform that helps protect lanes from smaller harassment or attack threats is helping not just tactically, but economically. This is also why the A-10's role has to be described carefully. It matters, but it has limits. It is useful against small boats and close-in surface threats, but it does not solve the mine problem by itself. Reuters reported that the U.S. is setting conditions to clear mines and that destroyers moved through the strait as part of a broader effort to establish safer passage. Mine clearing is still primarily a naval and engineering mission, increasingly involving unmanned systems and protective escorts. The A-10 can help secure the environment around those operations by discouraging or responding to small vessel interference. But it is not a substitute for maritime mine countermeasures. That distinction is important because it explains the title of this video in the right way. The A-10 matters in the Hormuz blockade because blockades are never just about the largest assets. A blockade succeeds when the whole system works: surveillance, command, escorts, legal enforcement, mine clearing, route control, and deterrence against interference. In a place where Iran has long relied on asymmetric tactics, especially smaller fast attack craft, the A-10 fits the part of the mission that deals with persistent, close-in, hard-to-manage pressure. There is also a broader strategic point here. The continued use of the A-10 shows that older platforms do not disappear just because newer systems exist. They stay relevant when their specific strengths still match the problem on the ground, or in this case, on the water. The official Air Force fact sheet still highlights the A-10's endurance, low-altitude handling, and weapons flexibility. In a conflict environment dominated by narrow waterways, fast surface contacts, and the need for visible overwatch, those strengths remain useful even in 2026. At the same time, the aircraft's relevance does not mean permanence. The A-10 has been moving toward retirement, and many analysts have argued that newer manned and unmanned systems will eventually take over more of these missions. But right now, current reporting shows that the A-10 is still being used because commanders believe it fills a real operational need in the Hormuz fight. That tells us something important about the present moment. The blockade is not a clean, high-altitude, long-range-only operation. It also involves staying close enough to the problem to manage the smaller, faster threats that can complicate everything. And that brings us to the real takeaway. The Strait of Hormuz is one of those places where geography magnifies every decision. A small boat can matter more there than it would in open ocean. A mine can matter more there than it would in a wider route. A delayed tanker can matter more there because the world is watching the price of oil almost in real time. In that kind of setting, the A-10 matters not because it changes the whole war by itself, but because it is tailored to one dangerous slice of the problem, keeping pressure on small maritime threats so the larger blockade system can function. So if you hear people talk about the Hormuz blockade as only a Navy story, that misses part of the picture. It is a Navy story, yes, but it is also an air power story, a logistics story, an energy market story, and a systems story. The A-10 Warthog matters because in a choke point like Hormuz, control does not come only from the biggest ship or the most advanced missile. Sometimes it comes from having the right tool watching the right part of the fight for long enough to make the whole structure hold together. That is why the A-10 matters in the Hormuz blockade, not as the whole answer, but as a key part of how the U.S. tries to keep a narrow, tense, economically vital waterway under control when diplomacy has failed and smaller threats can have outsized consequences. Subscribe for clear breakdowns on military news and geopolitics.